Hey, everybody, welcome. Sorry about the tech glitches. It's 2020. Um, I welcome everyone who's here to this event, Hunter College, where even in the middle of a pandemic that has put our theater department online and during a time when the American theater seems to be on indefinite hiatus, all these young people are working towards going out and making a more diverse and more exciting and more meaningful American theater. Welcome specifically to the first of three conversations with the remarkable Jose Solís and his guests this semester. And welcome, Peppermint. We're all such fans, and I know we're going to learn a lot from you today. Jose is the Floria Lasky visiting artist, and I just want to say a word about Floria. I knew her a little bit, and I did business with her, which I always found terrifying, I must tell you. She was a formidable entertainment attorney. She represented such clients as Tennessee Williams and Carson McCullers and Jerry Robbins, and of course, Frederick Lowe, the same Frederick Lowe whose name graces our beautiful Lowe Theater. She was, like many of you today, the child of immigrants, and she was a Hunter alumna. Like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she was a pioneer in her field. There just weren't a lot of female entertainment attorneys when she started out, and she inspired countless women to assume positions of authority and real power in the American theater. So I'm happy to have this chance to thank the Lowe Foundation and especially Emily Altman, who's out there somewhere in cyberspace with us today, for making the Lasky Visiting Artist Series possible. Emily is a dedicated and generous supporter of this department, and we're lucky to have supporters like you, Emily, and of course, Patty and Jay Baker, particularly at a time when state money is being cut back. We depend on you more than ever. Thank you so much. I just want to say quickly, in addition to Jose's three events, next week's Wednesday at 1 will give us a chance to meet a consortium of Black theater artists and scholars called Classics with an X, who will talk to us about the important and absolutely essential expansion of the theater canon to include more Black playwrights and theater artists. And later this semester, we'll welcome Idris Goodwin, who's a writer, educator, rapper, director, and a serious force for social change. You can check his website. His first name is Idris, I-D-R-I-S, Goodwin, WIN.com, and of course, the Baker website. Jose began his career as a critic when he was a teenager. He launched a film review website while living in Honduras. He began writing about the theater while attending college in Costa Rica. When he moved to New York in 2012, he started focusing entirely on the stage. His work has appeared in the New York Times, American Theater, TDF Stages, Backstage, Three Views, and America Magazine. He's the co-creator, as I'm sure many of you know, because you're dedicated watchers, of the Token Theater Friends podcast and web series. I first became aware of Jose when I read his, rather belatedly, when I read his account of the appalling behavior at someone working at a box office where he was trying to pick up a ticket. I saw, and I have to say, I loved the righteous anger of this post. And I thought, man, that is a person I just have to get to know. We connected online after he wrote. He'd left the Drama Desk nominating committee. The Drama Desk is very, very important in New York City award because it includes both Broadway and off-Broadway. Very influential. And he wrote that he had just grown tired of being the only non-white voice in the room and was starting his own project to develop BIPOC critics. This project is now launched. It has its first cohort. And I just think it's an incredibly important project, as I wrote him at the time. And I think it will seriously change the American theater. I just want to say from my own experience, having produced a fair number of African-American or Africa diaspora or Latinx plays, I found the critics, no matter whether they quote liked or quote didn't like the show, they were just clueless as to what the writers were trying to do and the companies were trying to do. So I think this is hugely important, what you're doing, Jose, with this. It's really cool, and we will help in any way we can. And we look forward to learning from the work you're doing with these critics. Peppermint, welcome to Hunter. Thanks for coming. This is going to be really fun today. Jose, over to you.
Hello. Well, it says someone has to start my video, so I guess I'm gonna wait for that. But it's good, Gregory, because like you made me blush, so I didn't want people to see me blush.
That was my intention, my friend.
It was your intention. Okay, let me see. Can you see me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm so excited to be here. You know, when I was very little, when I was growing up in Honduras, I had this idea that I was starstruck. Like whenever I saw some of my favorite people on TV or movies, I would be suddenly like starstruck, and I had completely forgotten what being starstruck was like until the very first time that I went to DragCon a couple years ago. By then I had met, once I was like next to Brad Pitt and he was like, "Hey man," and I was like, "Hey Brad Pitt," and not even that moment like got me starstruck as much as I was starstruck by seeing people like Peppermint. The reason why is because I think in many ways my idea of what being a star is like has changed very much, and now you don't only have, you don't need to only have talent and to be incredibly great at what you do, which is something that Peppermint does very well as a singer, as an actor, as a performer, as a live performer. But also like right now you need a little something extra, which is to combine all of that with a sense of what's good for the world, what's good for society, what's good for your community. So I am about to be extremely, extremely starstruck, even more now, by the wonderful Peppermint.
Hi.
Hi, Peppermint. I am so starstruck. I'm sorry.
Oh, darling. Let me see. Can I start my video? Okay. Oh, let me see. Can I start it? Yes, I can. All right.
There you are. Hi, Peppermint.
Hi. Okay, so nice to meet you.
You as well. I am so excited. Like I cannot even, I mean, I don't want to make this about me like loving you and head over heels so much, but we'll get to that at some point. But I was like, like when you showed up, it was like, it's magic. And I'm going to try to see if you can try to like explain or give away some tricks about how you make that magic happen when you're performing, but we'll get to that in a second. Right now, I mean, everyone who's here, everyone who's watching knows you very well. We know your music, we know your performances. Like the people who were lucky enough to see you in Head Over Heels know how electrifying you are. And but for starters, like, if you were asked by someone who's never seen your work before, how would you describe your artistry? What do you do, Peppermint?
Well, in addition to kind of how you and Gregory had described me, I am an actor and a singer and a dancer first. And I definitely consider myself, I don't know if I consider myself an activism, but I consider myself someone who's definitely engaged in the activism space, just because I care about some of the things that are important, hopefully, to everyone else. I care about other people.
That's beautiful. When you were very, very little, how did you realize you wanted to be a performer? Were you someone who was like spending lots and lots of times in your room, putting on clothes and like singing and acting in front of the mirror? How did that come about?
I was. I mean, I don't really know the very first time. You probably have to ask my family, but I'm sure I know that there were many family dinners that I spent performing in the living room, as kids do. But I think one of the earliest times that, looking back, that I realized, okay, this was actually a little unusual is when I went around and collected all the kids from the neighborhood, and I had the power of persuasion somehow to get all the kids from the neighborhood in my apartment, and I told them which role in The Wizard of Oz they were going to be. And I went to my mom's closet, which was the costume closet, and just took out whatever would like closely resemble the clothes of the characters, and had these kids putting on my mom's clothes, which are way the wrong size. And then I cut out little yellow card construction paper squares and laid them in a path all through the house. And that was it. We didn't really do anything. We sat down and watched The Wizard of Oz. But like I remember, like I was trying to produce a show, and And that's really interesting. It resonates in a different way today. And so then that's when I saw the kids looking at me like, okay, we're down with the pretending thing, but you're actually, you know, taking this a little further than any normal kid would, then I knew, okay, this is probably a little extra, my infatuation with entertainment.
I hope all your mom's clothes survived. Like you didn't like cut holes in them. When was the first time that you remember seeing something, watching a movie or going to a play or something where you saw yourself represented in art?
Well, I think the first time, I mean, literally the first time I ever saw, it would probably have to be literal because I was doing plays and drama club and everything, you know, at a younger age. And so I was able to see myself on stage, like when I watched the video back of the show. But that doesn't necessarily mean that my identity was represented. Of course, I was just playing a part in a school play or something. And so the first time I was able to actually see an identity that I resonated with, which I don't know, maybe if that's where you're going, is probably seeing, honestly, the very earliest memories, which mean I had nothing to cling on to because there wasn't that much representation. So the earliest time I was able to get an ounce of feeling like I kind of connected with who I was seeing on TV was probably like, you know, Richard Simmons or someone on TV in the 80s. He was the exercise guru. Very, very flamboyant exercise guru, who the great thing about that was, although I'm sure he was the butt of a lot of jokes, in his own realm, like he carried around this aura of like joy and happiness in what he was doing. And people were looking to him as the expert in exercise and what he was doing. And so he was kind of this queer person in a position of power in an early age. Now, he's not a person of color as far as I know. And I don't know how he identifies, but it's safe to assume maybe a gay man. I don't really know. He never even really talked about it in all the clips and things that I had seen growing up. They were never like, and here's our gay representation. He was just like a flamboyant person, but he was so larger than life and so good at what he did. Just like, you know, just like Walter Mercado, you know, like there's not really a conversation about queerness. In fact, there's probably some problematic aspects to some of that, but nevertheless, it's clearly someone who's a queer person in a position of power and respect. And so that was probably the earliest. And then, you know, as an adult, as someone who was able to actually kind of take ownership of my identity and express it the way that I wanted. I'd be remiss if I didn't say Laverne Cox on, you know, Just the New Black. Definitely was. And actually before that, probably Candace Kane on Dirty Sexy Money. Even though, again, Candace isn't a woman of color, her experiences are much more aligned to mine than Richard Simmons.
You know, it's so funny because like when I was little, I mean, you said Walter Mercado, so now like I hope I won't try to like start talking about like astrology and all of that. But so I love Walter Mercado, and it wasn't until I watched the Mucho Mucho Amor documentary on Netflix recently that I realized how much Walter Mercado had helped form my identity as a queer man growing up in a very poor Latin American country. And now we are blessed to live in a world where that isn't necessarily, you know, like you don't necessarily have to speak in code. Like things don't have to be in code. You can be who you are and you can tell people, this is who I am. This is my journey. And how does that make you feel, like knowing, you know, like you don't have to talk in code anymore. Like you get to own your voice, get to have ownership of your identity. And there's little kids all over the world growing up who look up to you as a role model now, just because you are you.
I think it feels great, you know. I think of like, you know, going back again, the impact that a lot of these people that we talked about, that they had on me and how like definite it was. And they were talking in code. They weren't speaking openly about any of these issues. And what's interesting is in the moments when there were debates or conversations around these things, you know, when I was younger, one of the big debates of the day in terms of equality was, you know, gays in the military. We never really got to hear from queer people or gay people what they had to say. It was literally everyone else talking about what the decision should be and who we were, but never any of us talking for ourselves. Not, I don't identify as gay, but obviously as a part of the queer community, my eye was on that, right? And so I think that one of the things that's very different today, whether it's in like a sort of a social justice or activism space, or even on film and television as an entertainer, those conversations are less and less occurring without someone like us being involved. Whether it's a queer person, whether it's a person of color talking about you know, issues that affect different minorities and communities. I think the minimum is that people are seeing that we need to include these people when we're talking about them and making decisions about them, if we are really being genuine about finding solutions that are impactful. Oh, my earring fell off. Oh well. And so that is newer, and I think because of that, we're, you know, it's just a kind of, I guess, a trifecta. It's people realizing that we're in this age of accountability where you need to kind of at least attempt to do things right, even if you don't get them right. And then folks, you know, more marginalized people from more marginalized communities having a larger platform, having a larger voice. I don't know if it's just the sign of the times that people are just interested in hearing different voices for once, you know, after so many years. But obviously, when, you know, one of the big-ish times that I think changed, I think was more of a watershed moment than people really realized, except for those of us who watched Disclosure, the documentary. The moment when Carmen Carrera and Laverne Cox were on Katie Couric and having their interview, and the first interview that Katie had mentioned surgery and you know, asking really, frankly, invasive questions, very personal questions, if anything. And then was, for the first time, a trans woman put a halt to that on national television. I mean, Katie Couric is very respected, and at her time was probably arguably one of the most popular, I would say maybe one of the most successful journalists in television, interviewing all of the top presidential candidates and just really had a very high seat. And so a trans woman who no one really knew at the time telling her, you need to stop, that's not proper, this is how you need to treat me, I think was a huge turning point. And it carried over not into the world of journalism and sort of standards and practices for how to interview someone who's trans, but then also how to treat people who are trans in your everyday life, how to deal with trans people and include trans people and their stories in like scripted film and television and entertainment. And so I think that was a really important moment. And I believe because of that, people are recognizing that our voices in those in that context are essential to have included. And so now I feel a lot more, I'm actually working on an album that comes out next month, and I'm feeling really good about just putting out music that is like, I'm a Black trans woman and this is my life and this is what's going on and that's it. And I'm gonna talk about universal things like love and happiness. Everyone can connect, that's how we connect. We don't have to connect because someone like a legend like Ricky Martin has to sing about loving some woman when we know that's not really him. I think he was in a position like many other artists. He's certainly not the only one. So it's not fair to just draw him as an example, but I'm just doing it for an example. I think there's lots of artists who obviously have lived either closeted or haven't really been, and certainly haven't brought their personal queerness, any ounce of the queerness into their work, into their art, into their music, into their whatever they're creating. And so I think we are in a day and age where that's starting to change. And I'm grateful for that. So yeah, I think it's definitely different than it was when I was growing up.
That's absolutely liberating, right? Like being able to talk about who you love and how you love, and not letting that, like, you don't have to sing about, yeah, I don't have to sing about being in love with some girl. Because I mean, I love girls, but I don't know how to, well, yeah. I really admire, I mean, you're an incredible performer and you're so much fun to watch, but I also really admire how great you are at educating people. And like in interviews, you have mentioned how like educating people in a way became part of your job. And I wonder, sometimes I get angry, to be honest. Like, I'm like, you can go Google this. Like, I don't need to like educate you. I don't need to teach you things. But you're so humble and you're so wonderful at incorporating this part that's not, in your work description into what you do. and I wonder, how did you come to terms with that? Was it easy to be like, okay, if I don't do it, no one else will?
I mean, I think that's probably a part of it. It's not necessarily true, but there is an ounce of truth to that, of course. It's if you want something done, do it yourself. If you want something done well, they say do it yourself. But I think in addition to that, I'm aware that there really aren't that many examples out there, right? And so I'm aware that a lot of the conversations that I'm involved in or places that I go, sometimes I'm the only one of that group or this group, or it's happening for the first time. Laverne Cox, we can't not pay attention to her in this conversation. But when someone like Laverne Cox, we look at her career and it's filled with so many firsts, historic moments. And that's in part because she is so epic and such a wonderful person. But it's also in a very large part, and even she would say this, because no one was providing these opportunities before. And so that's kind of my response when people ask me about doing Head Over Heels on Broadway. I am credited as being the first out trans woman to originate a principal role on Broadway. That's a mouthful. First trans woman to star on a Broadway show. Musical. Great. But it's not necessarily only because I made this great achievement. It's really because the moment was ready. There weren't any opportunities. They weren't casting out trans women in this show or that show 10, 20, 30 years ago that we know of. And so that's part of it, these historic moments and wanting to represent the community in a way that allows us to leave the door open, because we know one of us in the room is just tokenism. More than that means that things are a sign of change. And so that's where we want to go. We're still kind of in the era of a little bit of tokenism. We're just past that. And so we want to make sure that we represent in a way that we understand that there are still gatekeepers and that there are still people who are in control, and the gatekeepers don't necessarily understand who we are. They understand that it's important to have one of us in the room, but they don't understand all the other things that are important and necessarily. And so having an opportunity like that, to me, is an honor and a blessing, and I'm able to, and I really want to do it justice, right? It's not enough to just have been cast in the Broadway show. I'd like to really do a good job in it. You know what I mean? And so that's one part of it. And then I think the other part of it personally is probably just my connection to, I've always been excited by empathy and connecting with other people. I think that's part of the reason why I like to perform. Or maybe I'm empathetic because I like to perform, and maybe I like to perform because I'm empathetic. I don't know, but it's one of those things. And so yeah, I think that's pretty much what it is.
But I mean, even if it's like a little bit like, I was get so excited about this, even if it's like a little bit, maybe a little bit strange for you to hear, there is a before and after Peppermint and the Broadway history books from now on. And that's, I think that's pretty cool. But I wonder, like, obviously, like you're very young and you have many, 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 many decades ahead of you in your career. But, knowing this, for instance, that you're setting precedents that did not exist before, does that make you more conscious about building a legacy? Having building something that you're like, okay, I did this, and does that affect your work? And you're like, nope.
No, I'm really concerned with sort of the here and now and what the work, the goals and solutions are what is in my mind. And I don't know, maybe I need to focus on something else, but I think that's what keeps me going. That's what motivates me. I'm aware that, I mean, I certainly don't want to be forgotten when I'm gone and moved on. It would be, I don't want them to go and like rip down my name and burn my things. And so I don't know. I'm aware that all of us have the potential to leave a legacy. And so I would like my legacy to reflect the truth about the things that I've done. And so by that token, yeah, it would be great if the things that I did are still connected to who I was and the mark that I hopefully left. But other than that, I don't need to be remembered as the first or the greatest or the one or the most or the least or the anything. In comparison to other people, it would just be great to be noticed, recognized, and remembered for what I actually did. If that makes any sense.
It totally makes sense. And I don't think anyone who sees you perform can forget you. So you're covered on that. But we're talking about your legacy, but I want us to go back in time a little bit. And, we're talking to the students at Hunter College, the drama department. And, people get very discouraged sometimes because being an artist takes a lot. It's not everyone gets like some like lucky break, like in those Broadway shows where like they arrive in New York and someone's like, you're a star, you're casting the show. Like that's not how.
Or they even find an apartment.
That's not how life works. And I wonder, before you got the exposure that being on Drag Race gave you, for instance, you had been working and working and working relentlessly for years, right? Like, what kept you going back then? Like, what advice would you give to students who don't see, that dream job happening? How did you do it?
Well, I mean, I was never focused on like being famous or having I didn't really have a goal in mind and an end result. There wasn't really a finish line. I was just really, it went from, it'd be great to be able to get experiences and gain experiences to, it'd be great to be able to earn a living. And that's what I was mostly focused on. And I still am. And then I thought it would be great to, be able to affect some positive change in what I'm doing. That was kind of been the arc over the last 20 years of me working in the city. Part of that includes my time on Drag Race. And so I don't necessarily have like the best advice about how to get famous or anything. But in terms of one thing that I do know is that I've witnessed people who have had before and after my time on Drag Race, I've witnessed individuals who had sort of that lucky break and couldn't hold up to it when the time really mattered. And so don't be one of those people is what I would say to the students here in the Hunter Theater Department. Be one of the people who we know is going to be dependable and who we know is going to be put in the work and who we know knows their stuff, be one of those people. You can't control the timing otherwise. So it's better to be like really prepared and know your stuff. And I can't say that I'm like the most prepared and know everything. I don't, but I feel really good about, I have to honestly say pretty much all of even to this day, I have an album, maybe it's to my detriment. I'm working on this album, for instance. I'm really not focused on how many people it reaches or if it charts or not. I just want to put out good work. Even if 100 people, I think 100 people will listen to it. Even if only 100 people listen to it, I want them to be like, we love this. I don't want them to be like, oh, I'd rather have 100 really happy, satisfied people connect to what I do than a million people that are like, oh, we saw it. I don't want that.
I don't, I'm not a performer. Like, I don't know how to perform. That's why I love performers so much. Because like all of you are doing the kind of magic that that makes me be happy about being alive. So if you had to explain to
Performing
me,
right now.
don't say that.
Get
It sounds
on
like
screen.
I get really bad stage fright when I think about that. So let's not go there. But if you had to like explain to me, a mere mortal, in terms of what all of you like incredible people do on stage, what would you compare it to? Something that I've experienced maybe in life.
I mean, literally, it's probably just really close to public speaking, right? I think that's, I think public speak. I mean, I've done both, and I think that public speaking has an element of that. And I have to be honest, like a lot of that stage fright and stuff that happens. Anybody here watching can tell you, a lot of that was really. It's like this real. It's almost like the Wizard of Oz or something, or the Wiz. It's like a really scary door to a really comfortable and fun room. And so all that is kind of like at the entry, like, oh, I'm scared. What are they gonna? And then once you're inside, you're like, oh, I got this. This is just me connecting with people. And if you're genuine about your connection on stage, I mean, it's more difficult in film and television because there's not an audience. But if you're genuine about the art and connecting to it, it's everything else it'd be so easy to brush through. When you're only focused on the response of the people over the work, over what you're doing, if you spend more time thinking about, I mean, I do want to liken it to public speaking. If you spend more time thinking about, are people going to like the speech, and less time actually writing the speech, then you have nothing to go on and people aren't going to like speech. But if you're like, I don't care what they say, but I'm going to write the best speech I can write and learn it and know it, then who cares what they're going to like it. It's like a win-win. And so that's how I feel about that. I wish I had more sage advice, but that's it.
No, that is very sage advice, because I wanted to mention earlier, like you've been speaking my love language all this time by talking about the Wizard of Oz so much, because I have my Judy Garland tattoo over here.
Yeah.
And I meant to ask you, and I forgot also, like, were you Dorothy? And your, as a little kid, your idea of the Wizard of Oz, were you Dorothy or were you Glinda?
I remember. Isn't that the weirdest thing? I honestly don't remember. I know there was a witch. I got everyone else ready, and I did not trust anyone else as Dorothy. But to be honest with you, I was probably a little afraid of admitting that I wanted to be Dorothy at that age, because I was really young, and I hadn't come out as trans, even though I fully knew who I was. And so I must have been Dorothy, but I wasn't like dressed up. But we didn't have like a little gingham checkered blue dress. And so I think I just left that role absent, and it was implied that I was obviously Dorothy.
I love that. So what is one thing about being an artist that you wish someone had told you before you were set on becoming an artist?
That everything you view as an achievement ends up becoming like sort of the base level, and then you keep working to hold on to it.
That sounds stressful.
Life is stressful.
Yeah, that's very true. What is the opposite of that? What is something that's very, let's say, underrated about being an artist that you wish people would have told you because you were like wanted to make it happen, even like like faster, like just like snap?
The response, and I know that I'm probably going to sound like I'm contradicting myself. The response from individuals who are able to break through and tell you how much you've touched their life, or the change or the difference that you've made in their life. That's different than getting 100,000 likes on a picture. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about an individual sharing their personal story and how something you did resonated with them, or who you are resonates with them. And that's never, I never take that very lightly.
And that's something that it's artists like you who get a chance to perform live for people get to experience, like, like people who are exclusively on TV or movies, or that people just listen to their music. they don't get to hear that. So did you have many of those experiences where you would do the stage tour for Head Over Heels, where it'd be like hundreds of people telling you, you know, how much you had touched them?
Yeah, there were a lot of those moments. I don't know what it is about, if it's me or the role or the different work that I do, or maybe it's all. But like I have, and compared to other people that I know that are kind of in a similar spot in their career, I seem to sure get a lot of really emotional connections with one-on-one connections with fans. We had to have a box of tissues in my DragCon booth. And I know that that's not necessarily the case with everyone, right? And so I think it's great, you know, that's the type of connection that I have, rather than being known for like something that's just bitchy, or like treating a clip where I cursed somebody out and treated somebody horribly. Some people are known for that, and thank God that I'm not. You know, thank goodness, wherever you celebrate.
I've been so impressed because you've been doing so much during the pandemic, where, you know, like for the first like few weeks, I had to drag myself from my bed to the couch and maybe go make myself a sandwich. And you've been doing so many interviews, you've been appearing in so many places, like, and you've been working also. How were you able to remain creative during quarantine?
Well, you know, same. The first few weeks, really, frankly, I was very scared the first few weeks, and I was really, you know, just following the quarantine. I mean, I'm still following the protocols. The first few weeks, first month, even the first month and a half, it was not that eventful. I'd already recorded a lot of my album, and I was supposed to go on tour around the time the pandemic was starting. I had 2 different tours that I signed on to, and we would have been well on tour, and the album would have been out by now. Of course, all that changed, and then, you know, I had to kind of figure out, like, well, do we just try to force it out during the middle of this pandemic, when people are thinking about, like, you know, throughout the stages of the pandemic, our mind was on different things. Not that we're not focused on people's health and safety now, but I think there was a lot more fear around it, and certainly a lot of lack of understanding. And so it's like many things, it just didn't feel appropriate. And I think I needed to pause on my own personal art for a minute, the same way that a lot of these big corporations decided to halt. I mean, I can't tell you, after, I think the excitement from World Pride last year here in New York would have carried through to June and Pride in New York this year. And I know that there was a lot of companies that were focused on kind of trying to replicate the success of last year's World Pride in New York, where we had, not only was it World Pride where we had people coming in from all over, but it was also the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall, of the first march, or actually no, the Stonewall march was this year. And so I think there was a lot of that excitement. There was a lot of you know, corporations, corporate money. There was floats. There was like the biggest party you've ever seen. It went on all night long. And so to juxtapose that to approaching Pride, this conversation around Pride was, Pride's canceled this year, yada, yada, yada. We're all going to be stuck inside, which, you know, obviously we were stuck inside. And then corporations were responding to that, and they already have their, like, I can't tell you how many like FedEx or overnight deliveries I got with like party packages with like a rainbow streamers and a party blower and a party hat to celebrate Pride. And they were like sending them all to my house. And then the video with George Floyd came out, and so much changed. Really what changed for me was in the middle of that, seeing the video of Ahmaud Arbery. But then obviously the continuation of what feels like an impossible string of events that we're trying to get to the end of, with regards to unarmed Black men being killed and police brutalization, of Black bodies, and then just the systemic racism in general of Black and brown bodies and bodies of color and women and trans women and queer people and non-binary folks, disabled people, and you name it. And so all of those things obviously came to a head. We know that. We've been having these conversations for a couple of months now in a way that we weren't having them 6 or 7 months ago. And so all of a sudden, my purpose just became a lot more clear in that time.
I hear you on that. Do you, because one of the questions that I've been grappling with, because also, as a gay Latinx cis male, like I always wonder, like there are conversations within the LGBTQ community that we don't have. Like we don't really talk about race, to be honest.
We really talking about race, yeah.
It's like we brunch and we go to the march and that's it. And I'm often very disappointed, like this year, I could not feel pride as a member of the LGBTQ family if we were doing nothing to acknowledge systemic racism in this country and all over the world, to be honest, but especially in America. Like, how can I feel pride? I was asking my friends, like, how can I feel like happiness in June when we're seeing all of this is going on? And no one really wanted to engage in that conversation. They were like, oh, they're separate things. And I want to talk to you a little bit about, at some point also in Brooklyn, I remember there was this huge march, like, thousands and thousands and thousands of people that got together. Because one of the things that people weren't talking also was the Black Trans Lives Matter movement. And even that, there are some things that people don't want to talk about for some reason, that they refuse to talk about. And what does the, specifically the Black Trans Lives Matter movement mean to you as a human being and as an artist in terms of visibility and in terms of like getting the message out?
I think it's just important that people realize that, like, if we're talking about, human rights and civil rights and equality, that includes queer people and it includes Black queer people. And because someone's Black and queer, it shouldn't erase them from either or both of those communities and conversations. When we're talking about, rights of all people of color or all African American people specifically in this country, of course that includes the ones who are gay. And if we're talking about, LGBTQ rights for all people in this country who are LGBTQIA+, then of course that includes the bisexual person and the person of color. And clearly for too long it hasn't. And that's just the bottom line. And so, I think we really allowed some people in the LGBTQIA+ community to get away with centering cis white male stories as gay men. And we would accept that that was enough. When we were talking about marriage equality, we were seeing 2 white gay men, and that was enough. And when we were talking about what mattered to the LGBTQIA+ community, lesbians, non-binary people, trans, bisexual people, and more, the person who would speak for all of us was a cis white gay man. And that's fine, that's great, years ago, baby steps, but now it's just not acceptable. And I think I believe that I don't think we were holding, we allowed people in the LGBTQIA+ community to be protected from being questioned about racism because they were in an oppressed class and a minority group. They're in an oppressed class, they are a minority. And I think that the thinking was, oh, I'm a minority, so I couldn't be racist, so I'm gonna say what I want and it doesn't count for me. I think that's what a lot of people were saying and doing. And now we're not allowing that. So that time is also up.
I'm so happy about that. It was, it's time. The time was up. I'm very happy about that. Before we get some questions from that people have submitted for you in advance and that people are going to ask, I want to ask you a question that I hope is not like a trick question or anything. But do you think that art can change people's worldviews and that art really can make a difference?
Of course it can. I think it can, and I think it does. Not entirely. I know that the work that organizations like GLAAD has been doing is extremely helpful and instrumental in holding the powers that be accountable so that we can get good representation on film and television. I think that's really important. I think that's probably why film and television leads theater when it comes to representation, and inclusion on stage and off stage, or in front of the camera, or in all realms of the industry. I think that's we can't overlook contributions from organizations like GLAAD, and they say that it's equally important. I'm paraphrasing, there are probably some quotes out there, but basically I've heard folks from GLAAD say that it's equally important to have representation. It's important to have representation. And then what happens, we also need the laws that support that. It's not enough to just have the laws. We can have the law that says, we already had a law that said it was illegal to discriminate against married couples, whether they were heterosexual or homosexual married couples. If they were legally married, it's illegal to discriminate. And what happened? In all these states, people were suing the state because they wanted to have religious exemptions and not have, not serve this lesbians a piece of cake. And, so you show that the law is not enough, right? We also need people to really understand who we are. And so I think that the laws and the policies are sort of the what, and maybe the representation, the inclusion in film and television and in the industry and entertainment are the why.
So how do we get you to run for office then? Okay, now we're gonna open up for a Q&A, and I don't know what I'm doing here, so bear with me.
Me neither.
I know, right? Okay, I believe there was, oh, give me 1 second. I'm getting a text. I'm getting a text from my producer, so I can feel like, oh, so we have a question, a video question, Peppermint, that a grad student named Jelani submitted for you in advance. So whenever the magical tech people are ready to send it, I guess we'll see the video. Oh, there we go.
Hi, I'm Jelani, an alumni from the Hunter College Theater Program. And on behalf of everyone at Hunter, I just wanted to say thank you to Peppermint and Jose Solís for joining us here for this very special Wednesday at 1. It feels really incredible to have you both here because we can learn so much from both of you.
Can we turn up the video, the volume?
We're not in the same room, but we are sharing a space together, which is what feels important. Peppermint, I wanted to ask you if you had any words of advice for young students and artists looking to create their own work, because you and Jose have both found ways to carve a name for yourself in the arts when, as we know, it is so heavily dominated by white men.
All right. On the next clip, if it's a video clip, if we can try to find a way to have it be a little louder, my volume's up all the way. And I can hear you properly, but I think I heard Jelani say, how do we make our mark in entertainment?
How do you
I'm
create
sorry.
your own work? Like, why
How
is
do
it
you-
important to create your own work and to make
Oh,
it?
why is it important to create your own work? Well, I really, it's it's important because it's the most authentic version of that you're going to get of yourself and what you want to say. And so I think it's very important to show other people how it can be done. If you identify as one in one way or another, having that represent, there's only one person that can represent you, and your work and your voice are important. And sometimes it's good and great and really important to collaborate and add your experience in wherever it may fit. Sometimes it fits in the top, sometimes it fits off to the side a little bit. And those are great experiences, and some of the most beautiful work can come from those. But then by the same token, you being able to exercise your voice, the medium that you have, however you get your story across, it's so important to tell your own story in your way. And I think that becomes the blueprint for a lot of these other people who are in the industry, then realizing that you have something to say,
I wonder, you already wear so many hats. I mean, both figuratively and literally. If directing is next, one of the hats that you're gonna wear.
Yeah, I would love to do. I mean, I'm really interested in all aspects of storytelling, and so I think directing is definitely. I think it's inevitable at some point or another.
I can't wait. I can't wait to see your version of The Wiz or The Wizard of Oz, like on Broadway or something like that. Okay, now I'm gonna read you some questions from the audience that they've submitted events. Kristen Hoffman is asking, how do you muster the will to create so frequently?
I honestly don't. It's rare. It's very rare for me, Kristen, to create something on demand. Most of the stuff that I'm engaged in is most of the times that I'm creating something, it's because I feel compelled to do it. And obviously in those moments, there's not really that much I need to muster. It's like, I'm doing this, it's a priority, right? There have been some times where I've been hired to write or something like that. And sometimes it's difficult. I can't say there's a magic button that you can push to pop out the best piece of art. I really think that most people would probably agree that some of the most impactful art, or let's say the opposite, some of the least impactful art is the art that's uninspired. And so just because it's time for you to do it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to really get done in a proper way. And so if there's no substitute for having that inner drive and that conviction and that self-motivation that says, I'm so invested in this and so emotionally connected to this or whatever, that I'm going to do it. That's the magic. Now, if we can figure out a way to bottle that so that you can get that feeling even at 8 a.m. when you wake up, great. Let me know. I'll buy it.
Like peppermint spray. Where do you feel inspiration? For me, it often comes when I should be going to sleep. That's the moment where I'm I feel like I need to write this essay right now, when I should be doing something else. How does it happen for you?
I often get late night inspiration that keeps me up even later. And then part of the problem is I had this issue the other day. For the past 2 days, I was up late and I was like, oh, I got to write this. And I was working on my computer and I was falling asleep writing it. And I was like, oh my God, I have to keep going. I was like, must finish. And so those are those moments. It feels like torture. It's just, I don't know. I've never been tortured, but it's agonizing. And so hopefully it's not only late at night that people are creating. Uh, and I don't necessarily have one source or the other for inspiration. My inspiration is usually the emotional connection from other people, and I can't control when that happens.
How are you getting that right now that you are, performing on camera, for instance, like, being in touch with your audience is such an essential part of your work. And have you found a way to replicate that on Zoom?
No, I have not. Doing things like this is great because I'm able to see at least some people. Like, I'm looking at your gorgeous face right now, but it's not these are not really a substitute for like a live theatrical experience. Anybody who tells you that is lying. Now, when will we return? Who knows? Will it be the same exact experience as before? Probably not. And so we might be in that age where we're just looking in the screens. I'm so sorry, folks. In 50, 60, 70, 100 years, we know that we're going to be flying around in spaceships and looking at screens all day. We know that. I think that time has started earlier than we expected. And so being able to connect with people, we just have to find new ways to connect. We are humans, we will adapt, and we will, we'll connect. And so this is not a substitute for those things, but it's great. I mean, I've essentially turned my living room into a TV studio, with all this equipment. You don't even want to see that. But I do think that we will eventually be able to pull some of the essence of what we liked about performing and creating art before. We'll be able to kind of get a similar essence to this. And I think, it is what it is. That I'm of an age where I can remember the clear difference between a vinyl record and a cassette tape, and being able to say y'all, the music sounds like on a vinyl record, it sounds live, like in the room. And then going from cassette tape to CD. And I think a lot of people are probably old enough to remember the difference between the two sounds, right? It's very different. But we moved on to CD, and now there is a difference between like an MP3 that you're just streaming and listening to a CD. The audio quality is very different. But we've gotten used to it, and we just adjust. And now nobody's trying to listen to no records and tapes. And so, but we adjust. And there was a lot that we lost in terms of music and audio quality. But there's a lot that we gained. And I think it's the same thing. Obviously, I'm talking about something a little different. That was music, and this is, connecting with people. But I think it's kind of in the same vein. Technology brings us into a new era, and we just have to adjust. And now we are people who have probably pay more attention to how good our internet signal is more than we ever did.
Yeah, and I don't miss also. Remember when I had to like grab your pen and try to like get
turn the tape? Yes, yeah. And that tape wound. Wind that tape.
Next, there's a question from Emily Altman, not from Emily, from Sarah Nowick, a first-year transfer student, was asking what kind of tropes should creators steer clear from when portraying trans characters? Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, wow. I think what we should, okay, I mean, there are quite a few, Sarah. I think in essence, I don't know, but I don't want to necessarily talk about, label them as tropes or even archetypes, but I do want to say there's a list of things that we should be wary of. The typical story, the typical closet story, the typical transition story. And when I say closet story, I don't mean someone being in the closet. I mean operating in the closet. Like let's show a narrative where someone is out and the people around them, it's not in relation to how much shame we have about the person. Let's just show the joy, right? We know that the shame exists, and we don't want to, tell a false story here. We want to tell the truth if it's like autobiographical. But, you know, there are stories where there are people whose friends and families love them and are supportive and open, and the people that they meet, their love interests, aren't hiding it. Let's show those stories, because it's really important for people to be able to see that. The transition story is one we've seen before. It's so important for people to have an understanding of what the types of things trans people go through, and I mean, or can go through. And I think, you know, just focusing on surgeries, we know, is not necessarily accurate to many people's experiences. And it's not fair to everything else. I was so disappointed seeing the Danish girl, not because I was not honestly, less because of the portrayal from
Eddie Redmayne.
What's his name? Eddie Redmayne.
Eddie Redmayne.
Who I think did a great job, even though if we had to do it again today, even Eddie Redmayne admits that he probably would not have been cast in that role, but he did an amazing job, right? And it was a very touching job. There was a lot that was problematic about that film, but for me, the biggest part was, why did it end at her death after surgery? They kind of truncated it. Lily went on to have several surgeries and have many fabulous years in the sort of Berlin Renaissance era, and we didn't get to see any of that. It was just like, here's this person struggling to get surgery, and they got surgery and died. That's not even the truth. And so what about her life after that? You know, that was the beginning. The surgery is the beginning, not the end. And I think that's one important thing. And I think you hopefully would know that by now, because that movie's very old now. I mean, let's not say the movies are old, because I don't want to say that. The movie is a few years old. It's not the newest thing. And so I think those are the biggest things. Steer clear of transition stories that only focus on the surgeries. Steer clear of, you know, kind of that narrative that like everyone around this trans person is ashamed of them. And I think those are the two biggest things. That's what I would advise. That's what I would like to see. And
I always wonder why, when they tell these stories, like, they forgot that everyone feels joy. You know, if it's not the white person, like everyone else is suffering. All of us are suffering.
Yeah, we're just constant doom and gloom.
Okay, there's a question from Emily Altman, who says, you spend time studying at AMDA. So I'm wondering, since we're at the theater department, do you, or how do you think drama school can be useful to aspiring performing artists? What's helpful about it and what's missing?
I mean, to be honest with you, I would imagine that the success of any program, theater program, or at least the value, from my perspective, of any theater program from the outside is usually gauged, I believe, by the financial success of its you know, alumni. You know, who's been on TV and who's been in film and who's been successful. And so I think that's one barometer that we use to choose or to measure the success of these programs. But I think the ingredients of what makes up the success of that program, obviously, is the student body and the faculty, right? Not alone, but primarily. The experiences, the thoughts, the exercises that they bring to the class, to the program. And so that's going to change depending on who's there and who's not. And so that's a big part of it. For instance, if you get students who are, I mean, everybody surprised, if you're in theater school, you know that there's that moment at which the faculty kind of covertly works to kind of break you down, to break down a lot of the barriers and the things you brought in. And that's just normal, because a lot of people come with, even though they have talent, we come with all of these sets of protections and walls that we build up. And it's important to kind of break through those things, whether you're in acting college or you're just taking acting class on an individual level. And so going to these uncomfortable places is a real big part of acting. Obviously, I'm not lecturing, but the freshman or the first year student doesn't necessarily know that. And that's not on the brochure. And so, if we have folks that come with no walls that need to be broken down, then everyone's going to have a breakthrough much sooner. And so I remember when AMDA, they called it the second semester breakthrough, because it took a whole semester to get those walls to come down for people to be like, I got it. And everyone was like having these like eureka moments, right? These aha moments. And so that's kind of, I think, an inevitable part of the process, obviously. And I would imagine it's like that in every school. But so aside from that, so that's just my disclaimer. My experience in acting school was I was kind of resigned very early, because I was like, this isn't for, like, my teacher, actually, not all of them, but a very memorable teacher told me that I would never work on Broadway because, and I was in a musical theater performance program, I would never work on Broadway because there weren't any roles like me to work. That was horrible to hear, but where's the lie? And so I was like, well, I'm enrolled, so I guess I'll show up, but I'm gonna focus on working at the drag club at night. And so that's what I did. I went in, I passed, I got my grades. I don't know, it wasn't really like, we weren't getting letter grades, but I was not at the top of my class. However, I did some good jobs, I did some good work. I wanted to be dedicated to it, but the roles that they were giving me in school to learn with and do my performances with were just like these, I was like, I can't connect any of this. And that's my style of performance, is really kind of it needs to have an authentic connection, at least where the stage that I'm at right now in my life and in my career. I work better if I'm able to have an authentic connection. It's just a coincidence that I'm able to, I've been able to enjoy, I can't say it's a coincidence, it's just a sign of the times, that I was able to work and portray out trans Black women, right? I never thought I'd be able to do that, even after transitioning personally. And I thought I was transitioning myself out of the world of acting because there weren't any roles like me to do. And so initially they were giving me like I remember when I had to play like Jack from Into the Woods. I was like, what? I will never play Jack from Into the Woods, but I have to do it. Okay, I'm gonna do it. And I did it, and I did my best, and I did it. But I didn't really have the opportunity to get any of that experience of being able to bring more of who I am to the role. I think if I had been born a cis woman or a cis man and, some different identity, then they're able to bring a little bit more of who they are to the role. I had a classmate who was a young white guy, and he played a young white guy in a thing and was a baseball player. And he played baseball. And so there he goes. But I had to be this person that I don't even know what they were doing. And so a lot of my experience was really spent trying to, again, just like with Richard Simmons, look for, okay, the piece that I can understand, because it was almost like a different language. But the one tool that I remember taking out of class that stuck with me, and that the one piece that I was able to carry through, regardless of the role, regardless of the stupid song, or regardless of what I was doing, was the notion of affecting my audience and my co-workers, the other actors, through the actions. So if you're an actor, you know all about actions. It's very base level. And I had to put everything else away. And I was like, okay, what are the actions? And achieving those things. And so that's what I took out of thousands and thousands of dollars of student aid and tuition. Thank you, Sally Mae.
Our next question is from Megan, who is a graduate student at Hunter College. And Megan is asking, Peppermint, who was, or were your influences or mentors who became your creative engines in the artist you are today?
who are my creative influences? I'm sorry. I don't necessarily have a full list for you. I really find inspiration from everyday sort of trailblazers, people who, whether they're famous or not, probably not, but whose stories we can find through their experiences. You know, especially around voting season, which I hope everybody over 18 is registered to vote. Right now, after this, you should go and do it. Go to vote.org or vote.gov and look it up and register. And if you're 18 and you haven't gotten permanent residency in New York City yet, go ahead and make sure you absentee ballot vote back home, wherever your family is. Because I can guarantee you, we need it. I hate to be on my soapbox, but it is so important. And so anyway, finding the inspiration for me, it really comes from like everyday people that just are connected. And as I was going to say, like during voting season, there's never that shortage of inspirational stories about people in one place or another who are struggling with this or dealing with that. And so those are the kinds of stories that really inspire me.
And our last question is from Tim Cusack, who's saying, we lost another member of the drag trans community with the passing of Mona Foot in March due to COVID-19. This after the passing of many other legendary queens who were instrumental in establishing the Uptown House, voguing, and downtown club performance scenes of the 80s, 90s. How do you stay sane, healthy, and safe in the midst of the current conservative backlash? And how can we honor the memories of those we lost?
Well, how do I stay sane, happy, and safe and healthy? I really just, I take it day by day, to be honest with you. I try to focus on, I mean, there have been moments where I thought I was just losing it here in this apartment, you know, even though we're moving around a lot more than we were several months ago, I'm still pretty much here every day. And I'm in my apartment a lot more than I ever thought I would. I feel like I've been in this apartment for 10 years. You know, I've been done 10 years worth of living out of this apartment, and it has made me not know what to do with myself. One of the ways is really connecting with my friends and family. Now we have weekly conversations, you know, on Zoom. Staying connected with those people, obviously reconnecting with people from the past. I'm sure everybody went down their Facebook list. And those are some ways that I do it. Obviously, you know, listening to music and taking in as much art. I've been doing a lot more reading. I've also done a lot more writing. Personally, I've done a lot more writing and creating, and finished this album that I was speaking about. Comes out on the 16th of October. You can pre-save it right now. It's called A Girl Like Me, Letters to My Lovers. And so I finished that, put that up on the internet, and it's almost ready to go for all of you to listen to and enjoy. And I'm working on more. It's a trilogy, so there's a part 2 and part 3 coming out next year. And so that has taken up a lot of my time. I also just filmed a short film it's scored by my album, connected to my music we just wrapped a few days ago, and that comes out at the end of October. And so I've been really busy with those types of things. Those are the things that, and since it's my story that I'm bringing to life, my story that I'm putting onto the tape, MP3, music, my story that I'm putting into the music, it does give me a sense of purpose and connection. Aside from that, you know, I say just take it one day at a time and just honestly do your best. I know that's probably a very sort of trite answer, but that's what I got.
Awesome. Peppermint, so you have the album coming out in October. What else should we be on the lookout for? Like, tell us where to find you, where to go listen to your music, where can we go watch everything that you have going on right now?
If you're not following me, then follow me. I'm sending free merchandise for people who pre-save my album and share it. I've talked all about that on my social media, so you can go and see the rules behind that. But I'd love for you to go follow me. It's Peppermint247 on all platforms. Follow my Twitch, because I have a new show starting with myself in Alaska on Tuesday. And so I want people to view that. It's called Pep Talks Black Movie Classics. And we watch important Black movies, and then we talk about them on the internet. So check that out. Thank you so much from Madison for putting that in. And so that's my social media, and you can check me out. In addition to that, I have a new voting initiative that I'm working on with Bob the Drag Queen that we're going to announce that this week. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Just follow me, and then and get that album, and then everything else will be done.
I love that. I'm gonna go get that merch and like order everything right now also. Peppermint, you were an oracle on Broadway, but you're a goddess in real life. And I am so honored that you spent some time with us today. I am very happy. This was a dream talking to you. And I know that all the students who are here today really, really appreciate this. And we love you, Peppermint. Thank you for your incredible work and for joining us. Our next Wednesday at 1 is going to be on October 21st. And I want to thank Peppermint and everyone at Hunter who made this possible, and Emily Altman and the Low Foundation, as well as like, can you believe that someone named me like a visiting artist? Like, that's why I'm wearing my Proud Artist shirt today. I'm the Florida Alaska visiting artist this semester. So it's an honor. I cannot wait to see you all next time. And Peppermint, again, thank you so much. This was a true dream.
My pleasure, Jose. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.